Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a true survival mystery that is just, well, it's absolutely cinematic. We're looking at two legendary, doomed flights and what happens when human beings are pushed to their absolute limits in the most isolated corners of the planet.
So let's dive right into this incredible juxtaposition. Two passenger planes vanish from radar. Poof, gone. Everyone presumes hundreds of people are dead. You've got flight MH370, carrying 234 souls, plummeting into the ocean. And then flight NC-1602, with 134 souls, vanishing into the Bermuda Triangle. To the outside world, the story ended the second they dropped off the radar. But the reality? It was a desperate, years-long fight for survival.
Section 1. The inciting incidents. How it all began. You see, we have to start with the horrifying moments these aircraft fell from the sky, because the specific nature of their crashes literally set the stage for the nightmares to come.
And the sheer helplessness of both crews here is just terrifying. With MH370, a technical fault led to a poisonous gas leak that instantly knocked out the pilots. So the passengers were trapped in a flying tomb, speeding along on autopilot over the South China Sea for 5 agonizing hours until the massive Boeing 77 finally ran out of fuel and slammed into the ocean. Now contrast that with the Douglas DC-3 of flight NC-16202. They get caught in this catastrophic Bermuda Triangle storm that wipes out all their electronics. The plane is blindly, violently tossed into an uncharted island, but miraculously gets caught in the canopy of a giant jungle tree.
Moving to Section 2. Barren sand versus lush jungle. Different environments. Because the landscapes these survivors landed in completely dictated their immediate odds. It's all about the starting hand they were dealt, right? The MH370 survivors were trapped in this sun-scorched, endless blue cage, a tiny circular sandbank with exactly 2 coconut trees. That's it. The NC-1602 passengers, though, were swallowed up by the dense shadows of a wild, uncharted jungle. Both groups initially had no fresh water. They had to rely completely on rain. But while MH370 had literally nothing but a few crabs, NC-1602 had wild boars, totally unfamiliar flora, and raw materials to work with.
I really want you to wrap your head around this number, 83 meters. Imagine being one of the over 200 initial survivors of MH370, crammed onto an 83-meter sliver of sand. It was so incredibly small you couldn't even run across it. They were desperately rationing tiny drops of rainwater caught in plastic sheets, fighting over a handful of coconuts, and just baking under a relentless sun with absolutely nowhere to hide.
Now, over in the jungle with NC-16002, it was a totally different reality. They had more resources, sure, but the dangers were immense. I mean, they suffered their first fatality when a man ate a poisonous fruit, but they adapted. A retired Army doctor, Evelyn Reed, jumped right into action to treat severe crash injuries. A quick-thinking teenager actually used his glasses to harness the sun and start a fire. And, guided by a hunter in the group, they forged spears out of plane debris to hunt aggressive wild boars. They took a hostile environment and turned it into a harsh but functioning home.
Which brings us to Section 3, Leadership under Extreme Pressure. As days bled into months, the crushing psychological weight of isolation forced both of these groups into a corner, either organize or completely fracture.
And this is where we see how extreme starvation strips away morality. On the tiny sandbank of MH370, humanity simply broke down. When a large turtle finally washed ashore, it should have been a massive feast, right? Instead, a vicious factional war erupted over how to ration the meat. The infighting got so intense that the meat was largely ruined. The survivors split into 2 warring camps at opposite ends of their tiny 83-meter island, and communication practically stopped altogether.
Meanwhile, on the NC-1602 island, structured leadership actually managed to stave off the madness, at least temporarily. Captain Miller stepped up, organizing daily foraging and shelter-building teams. Dr. Evelyn took charge of medical care and hygiene, and engineer Arthur Vance tirelessly worked to repair the broken radio, even managing to send out a blind SOS before the battery finally died. This clear division of labor let them build a functioning microsociety.
But over the agonizing passage of time, situations deteriorated for everyone. By year 1, MH370's population plummeted to just 70 people, while NC-1602 dropped to 114. Jump to year 2, and the NC-1602 survivors actually built a boat to escape, but a brutal storm killed 16 of them. By year 5,
Even the structured NC-1602 fractured into factions after they made a terrifying discovery, ancient ruins and skeletons hidden on their island. And by year 8, nature delivered absolute crushing blows. MH370 lost one of its 2 life-sustaining trees to a storm, while NC-1602 was decimated by a massive cyclone.
Section 4. The psychological toll, despair and isolation. Because years of profound isolation breed a very unique kind of despair, slowly turning both of these unexpected sanctuaries into open-air graveyards.
The raw numbers over time really capture the devastating toll here. Flight MH370 started at 234 people and slowly, painfully ground down to absolute zero. Flight NC-16002 started at 134 and ended at 82. While the jungle survivors suffered heavy losses to illness, that tragic boat accident, and cyclones, the folks from MH370 faced complete and utter annihilation from starvation, disease, and the merciless elements.
Honestly, nothing captures the harrowing end of MH370 better than this simple, heartbreaking message. We're from MH370. We tried. It was found scratched into the back of a broken phone by the last dying survivors, right as their final coconut tree withered away, and their sandy refuge became a literal graveyard of bones.
Section 5. Tragedy and Miraculous Rescue. The Final Years. The climax of these 2 survival stories ultimately comes down to the brutal whims of nature and fate.
And the contrast here is just staggering. In year 11, Arav, the very man who first spotted the island with binoculars all those years ago, becomes the very last MH370 survivor. He dies entirely alone among the skeletons of his friends, sitting under a dead tree. But in year 9 for NC-1602, a literal earth-shattering miracle happens. A massive earthquake shifts the plane wreckage, exposing hidden wires, right at the exact moment a rare solar flare hits the Earth. This mind-blowing combination of astronomical and geological events miraculously restores power to their broken radio.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Flight NC-16002. We are alive. We have been stuck on an island for 9 years. I mean, just imagine the chilling silence in the Miami air traffic control room when they heard engineer Arthur Vance's crackling voice deliver this impossible, ghost-like message across the airwaves after nearly a decade.
The final aftermath of these 2 flights couldn't be more different. A lost tourist boat eventually stumbled upon MH370's island, finding a horrific scene of skeletal remains, tiny shelters, and a single skeleton still clutching a dry twig. On the flip side, the U.S. Navy successfully tracked the NC-1602 SOS, rescuing 82 weeping, severely emaciated survivors. Their unbelievable endurance was actually immortalized later in the 1958 bestseller Lost in the Echo by James Baldwin.
So, as we look back at the sun-scorched graveyard of MH370 and the lush, conquered jungle of NC-16002, we have to ask ourselves, when completely stripped of civilization, what truly dictates the line between life and death? Is it your environment? Is it your leadership? Or is it just pure, unpredictable luck? How much of our survival is actually in our own hands, and how much is just left to the mercy of the elements? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you in the next.